Okay, we're in Tanya, in middle of Perek Zion. On the top is page Yud Beis. On the bottom, it's page 30. Okay, until now, we're learning that there's the neutral evil that could be elevated, but if you eat it for the wrong purposes, you lower it into evil, into total evil. But because it wasn't really evil, you could elevate it back. But you need what's called chibur kever to cleanse the body from the mark remaining from the food that you lowered into klipa. So it's called chibur kever, which English translated purgatory of the grave, which we explained last week. The Zohar says it means that the body decomposes in pain, and that is the cleansing of the soul and the body of the fact that they ate this food. But total evil, shalosh klipos hatmeis, can never be elevated until Mashiach comes, when evil will be removed from the world. Or he says a super great level of tshuva that we explained last week, that the Aveda becomes a mitzvah, then you could elevate it. But generally speaking, no. Okay, so now the Alter Rebbe is speaking about, so to speak, sexual issues with wasting seed and all that. So he says like this: the life, the vitality, which is in the drops of semen, which was one of a very big sin. It mentioned in the Torah, the punishment is death in heaven, like Yehuda's two sons, Er va'Einan. He says, when a person has an emission of seed intentionally, actively. So even though you lower it into total evil, you can elevate that semen that you lowered into evil by wasting it. You could do it with tshuva and nechena, with the proper tshuva. You don't need the super avera becoming mitzvah tshuva. Uva kavana atzuma, and tremendous intent. The kriya shma lamita, when you do shma before going to bed. When you read shma before going to bed with the proper kavana and the proper tshuva, so that cleanses that sin of the emission of seed. Kuneda me'arizal, as no more Arizal writes, or Meromes the Gemara, and the Gemara alludes to the fact, Kol HaKrede Krishma Mitase. The Gemara says, whoever reads Shema before going to bed properly, Kilo Eches Chedav Shel Shtei Piyes, as if you're holding a double-edged sword, Lahare Gufis HaChitzeniim, to kill all the evil forces, Shenash Levus, that becomes a garment, L'chaya Shebetipa, to the life, vitality that's in the seed, and you will be elevated to Kedush. Okay, very briefly, if somebody emits seed, so then they're lowering it into total evil, but the Arizal writes, and the Gemara alludes to it, that by reading Shema properly with proper kavana and proper tshuva, you can elevate it. And he says, Lochein, when the Torah speaks about all the forbidden sexual relations, the Torah doesn't mention of their wasting seed. Why not? Even though in certain respects, emission of seed, wasting seed, is even worse. The Gadol Aveinai, and the sin is worse. From Hagdola Zeribe Hatuma, from the abundance and a lot of impurity, and the evil, by when you waste seed more than bias asuris, it says in Kabbalah that you bring more tuma by wasting seed than by having forbidden relations. So even though seemingly it's worse, but Alter Rebbe says it's not as bad in a certain respect. In other words, you lower it, the tumah is terrible. Okay, but when you have actual intimacy, man and woman, you put it up, you lower it into worse level, that you can't do tshuva for it. Let me explain this outside. Now, the Rebbe says like this: when somebody emits seed in vain, it's total evil, and the tumah is indescribable. It's worse than the tumah that you create by forbidden intimacies. But the tshuva for zera levatola, the tshuva for wasting seed, is easier than the tshuva of intimacy. Why? He says, so in the Haggadah, Alter Rebbe says, because when you're having intimacy, the seed is going into the other person, is going into something physical. So therefore it becomes more tangible. The tumah, the impurity, is more by wasting seed. But because over there it becomes grasped in a woman, so then it's much worse. And therefore then by forbidden relations, to wasting seed, it's enough to cry back Krishma Lamit and do tshuva. Forbidden intimacies, you need tshuva so much that the Aveda becomes mitzvah. Over there, you need a super high level of tshuva. And I'll explain why in a second. Now we'll learn what the Gemara says. The Gemara says like this. There's a pasuk Shlomo Malach says, Mu'uves, a crookedness, that you can't fix. And the Gemara says a number of examples for such a thing. One thing the Gemara says, you missed Shema. You can never make it up because you missed Shema that day. Even if you do it from now on, you still missed it. But here the Gemara says a different thing. Shabbat ala erva, if somebody has intimate relations with a forbidden relation, v'helid mamzer, and he gives birth to a mamzer, then tshuva is really tough. Why? Sha'az gamim yaset tshuva kol gdela kol kach. Even if you do a very lofty level of tshuva, there's a problem over here. This mamzer, as it's called in English, this bastard, is running around. There's a living evil that you created. And it says, then it's impossible to re-elevate that seed of the Jew, which is originally holy. And now it went into the forbidden person that you has relations with, because it comes into this world, and becomes tangible in a physical person. So he says, tshuva for a mamzer is almost impossible. Here, the Alter Rebbe doesn't say it, but there's a famous story. It's a long story called The Coachman. That's the English story in Talks and Tales. But it's the introduction of the Friedrich Rebbe to a mimer of the Mittel Rebbe called Pekeh Chivrim. And over there was a long story. The Alter Rebbe called in a chassid, Rabbi Yosef Kolbai, who is an unbelievable scholar. And Alter Rebbe called him in and said to him once, for the benefit of your soul, it's better for you to become a wagon driver better than a Rav. A whole long story. The bottom is he became a wagon driver. The whole long story how he became the wagon driver. And one day he was taking a Jew that went off completely. And this Jew had children from a non-Jewish woman. And the whole story. And then he became a Baal Tshuva. But it kept, every time he thought about the Goyish kid that he created, he got sicker. And he was deathly ill. And Rabbi Yosef Kolba, then Rabbi Yosef Balagola, he went and everybody said, don't tell him about his wife and kids. Don't tell him because it will make him feel worse. He'll die. And Rabbi Yosef Kolba said, I have to talk to him privately, everybody out. And the story that happened was his wife and kids were traveling on a wagon and they got killed. And Rabbi Yosef Balagala went over to him privately when nobody heard it. And he said to him, I want you to know your Goyish wife and the kids that you created died, and therefore your tshuva is complete and accepted. And he became better, and he became a real Baal tshuva. Later on, years later, after the Alter Rebbe passed away, and the Mittel Rebbe, whose anniversary is today and tonight, the Day of Freedom, Rabbi Yosef Kolbe went into the, Rabbi Yosef Balagala went into the Mittel Rebbe, the Yechidus, and he said, my father made from a scholar a wagon driver, and I'm going to make from a wagon driver back to a scholar. Your mission as a wagon driver was accomplished. Go back and become a Rav in the city. And he lived a long time. He was a very great tzaddik and a big Rav. But sometimes we find that there is a level of tshuva, even though the Alter Rebbe is saying even Tanya, it's almost impossible, because as long as the mamzer is running around, like, how can you do tshuva? There's an evil that you created that's existing here. So, and the answer is sometimes there could be such a level of tshuva that will take care of that also. The mamzer is not to blame, but we're not to blame for Adam and Eve did either, with all the difficulties we have in life. But parents have to think before they do things. Okay, let's go to Perek Ches. Now he says in Perek Ches, by the way, what the Gemara says, Hashem cries over three things that he created every day. And one of them, he cries over the fact that there's a mamzer in the world. Hashem is upset, but it is what it is. Okay, now in Perek Ches, he says like this. There's something more than when you eat non-kosher food. A bunch of this we discussed already before, but here is where Alter Rebbe is saying it. That's why they're called forbidden food. Because he didn't even know it was not kosher. The person saw a piece of food in front of him. He thought it was kosher meat. He ate it. And not only that, he ate it l'shem shemayim. He made a brach on it. He did the right purposes for it. Laved Hashem b'kerech achilahi. And he ate it. He didn't know it was not even kosher. He didn't know it wasn't kosher. He thought it was kosher. He ate it. He made a brach on it. He ate it for the right purposes to serve Hashem. And he actually did go. V'gam Paul v'asake. He actually did it. V'kar and he read chumash, v'espalal and he daven, v'kerech achilai, with the power of that food. But the problem is, doesn't matter what he thought. Realistically, the food was not kosher. Yeah, is he going to be punished for what he did? Not necessarily. But the life of godliness that's in that treif of food, in the pig, in the treif meat, will not be elevated in the words of Torah and tefillah that you did. Why? Had to like kosher food would be. When a person eats kosher food for the right purposes and learns and davens, he elevates the food. Like we learned before. That's why it's called mutter, because you can elevate it. But isser, even if you didn't know it was forbidden, and you didn't know anything, and you went ahead and you ate it and learned and davened with that food, it doesn't go anywhere. It's bound, it's tied to total evil. From total evil. And then the Alter Rebbe takes it a step further. Maybe it's only by biblical sins. How about rabbinic sins? Things that are rabbinically forbidden. Like, for instance, chicken and milk is only rabbinically forbidden. Biblically, meat and milk is forbidden. Rabbinically, chicken and milk. So a guy eats chicken and milk. It's only rabbinic. And he says, you can't elevate it. In other words, if a guy by mistake had chicken and milk together and he didn't even know it wasn't kosher, he didn't know it was mixed or whatever, and he learned in daven, even though it's rabbinically forbidden, it's still not elevating that food. it's still Shalosh Kibsat Tmeis. Shechamurim Divrei Seifim, Yesim Divrei Teda, because rabbinic things are even stricter. And by the here, the Alter Rebbe is adding a very interesting halachic question. Okay, that is when the Torah forbids. It's relevant to this Tanya over here. When the Torah forbids pig, does that mean that pig is forbidden, or does it mean the Jew cannot eat pig? But really, pig is not bad. Is that the Jew cannot eat it? Meaning, in halachic terms, in yeshiva terms, is it gavra? Is it on the person? Or is it cheftza? Or is it the object which is forbidden? Here in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe clearly says that it's the object which is forbidden. The Alter Rebbe says pig is sholosh klipas hatameis. It's not that I can't eat it. According to Chassidus, and that's what most opinions say, by the way, by a biblical sin, the object is a forbidden object. Many opinions, by the way, in halacha, say it's a lot written. The yeshiva bachim have a field there with this stuff in yeshiva. Many opinions say that by a rabbinic thing, the object doesn't become forbidden, because that ability the chacham don't have. In other words, let's say, again, chicken and milk is forbidden rabbinically. Yeah, some opinions say that the chicken and milk is not forbidden because the rabbis can't make that food forbidden. They can say, person, don't eat it. So many opinions in halacha say, by a rabbinic sin, the rabbis don't have an ability to forbid the food. They have the ability to say, you don't eat it. But again, in Tanya, we just said, even by rabbinic sin, the Alter Rebbe also says it shows Kibsat Tameis. Not only biblical forbidden object is forbidden, the object is forbidden, even by rabbinic things, Alter Rebbe says the object is forbidden. And then later we'll get to another interesting thing. There are many opinions that say that something which is forbidden for a certain time, again, the object is not forbidden. I'll give you an example. Chametz and Pesach. Okay? Before Pesach, you're allowed to eat chametz. After Pesach, you're allowed to eat chametz. During Pesach, you're not allowed to eat chametz. Yeah, now think, what happens over here? Does the chametz go from yes, no to yes, or the person is told, yes, now you can't, and now you could? Many opinions in halacha say, is money something forbidden based on time, like eating on Yom Kippur. They say you can't say the food on Yom Kippur is treif, because right before Yom Kippur it's kosher, right after Yom Kippur it's kosher. For the 24 hours of Yom Kippur it's not kosher. You can't say the food is shosh kibsat tameis. You can't say the food is treif, and therefore they say no, the food is kosher. In other words, very simply, on Yom Kippur, if I have a loaf of bread, is that loaf of bread forbidden, or I'm not allowed to eat it? So many opinions say no, you can't say the loaf of bread is forbidden, because 10 hours ago is kosher, and 20 hours from now it's going to again be kosher. So you can't play games like that. So therefore, what we'll see later in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe seems to imply that even chametz and Pesach is shosh kibsat tameis. Even then, it's taka completely evil. It's not that the person can't eat it. The object becomes evil. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, whether it's rabbinic, forbidden, whether it's biblically forbidden, if a person even ate it accidentally, they didn't even know they were eating it, and they ate it for the right purposes and to elevate it, and they went and they learned and they davened and they did everything good with it. The Alter Rebbe says the food, the pig, the tray of food that you ate never elevated itself to Kedusha. It never elevated itself to kedusha. And if it never, why didn't it? Because it's bound to it's bound to evil. If it's bound to evil, you cannot unbind it. How does it affect a person? Because a person, like they say in America, you are what you eat. The eating, what a person eats, has an impact on the person. This is not, now I'm going to emphasize clearly that when the Torah says you can't eat something, there's no logic behind it. Okay? Torah says it's forbidden. That's it. There's no logic. After we know that it's forbidden, sometimes we try to think a reason why did the Torah forbid it. Well, that's not the reason why it's forbidden. It's forbidden because Hashem said so. Commentaries of Torah and Poskim and in Halacha and the philosophers say, the Torah philosophers say that when a person eats animals that have the tendency of ripping apart other animals, like a lion or these types of things, it creates within them that tendency. Believe it or not, you are what you eat. And therefore, when we get to the dinim of Chol of Yisrael and not Chol of Yisrael, it's very interesting. In Chassidus, it says that non-Chol of Yisrael, Chol of Akum, if it's called, impurifies the mind. It actually impurifies the mind. What does it have to do with mind? With drinking milk, what does it have to do with the mind? What we take in impacts us. And not only that, food is even more. Because food, which is digested internally and becomes our blood and flesh, like Dr. Rebbe used the expression many times coming up, nas dam ubasa kipsarei, it becomes blood and flesh of his existence. So of course, if you have something in you that's total evil, of course it has an impact on the person that have negative traits. It does impact the person. Just like everything we see impacts us, everything we hear impacts us, and everything we definitely eat. And that's why kashrus is so important, because it's one of the few things we actually digest internally. And that's why the Rebbe came out with a campaign many, many years ago that when little babies, a lot of people overdid it, in my not such humble opinion, but the Rebbe didn't want, when kids when babies, newborns, were they put them in a crib and they have these mobiles, that sing music and they go around and it keeps the kid quiet and so on and so forth. The Rebbe said there shouldn't be non-kosher animals. There shouldn't be non-kosher animals. Why? Because a kid is sitting there, a baby, an infant, a week old, 2 weeks old, even younger. What are they looking at? Non-kosher animals. It has, and the Rebbe proved it even scientifically, it has a terrible impact on the baby's development and definitely in the spirituality of it. That doesn't mean there's nothing wrong with a horse. You can ride a horse. A horse is a very good animal, but it's still not kosher. It's shalshut tzatmeis. You can benefit from it, but it's still shalshut tzatmeis. And therefore, a baby shouldn't be staring at a horse. Or, in fact, it's very interesting. There was a periodical, a kids magazine called Olamenu. It was a very from a very frum organization. And instead of Mickey Mouse, they had a character called, it was a kids magazine. So instead of Mickey Mouse, they had Mendel the Mouse. They had Mendel the Mouse. That was the character for the kids. It was not Mickey. It was a Jewish name, Mendel the Mouse. The Rebbe was against that concept. You have a kids magazine. Why do you have to make a mouse? Take a duck. Do Donald Duck, David Duck. A duck is a kosher animal. Why do you have to do Donald Duck? Mickey Mouse. It's a mouse. Do David Duck. Make something a kosher animal, because it does impact the person. with the food that we eat definitely has a major, major impact on the person. And therefore, the Alter Rebbe says, if you eat that food, it's very bad for the person. And not only that, it's much harder to do tshuva.
What if it's totally unintentional? Had no idea that it wasn't kosher, and they did check, and everybody told them it was good. You ate it, and now what? It's part of you.
Okay, so the question was just asked, but people told you, let's say it was kosher, and you thought it was kosher, and it was complete innocence. But the answer to that is very simple. If you have a bottle of poison, and somebody tells to you it's health food, it's super health food, it's going to cure you from all your diseases, and they convince you. But bottom line is, you drank the poison. You know what? You drank the poison. God forbid you're going to die, not the guy that told it to you. I once was in somebody's house. Once in somebody's house, a from guy, and he drank. He had a drink there that wasn't a high standard of kashrus. So he said to him, you really shouldn't be drinking this. It had a kosher symbol, but it wasn't a very reliable hefsher. So he said to me, I don't care, because I'm not going to burn in hell. The guy that says it's kosher is going to burn in hell. That's what he said to me. So I said to him, but my friend, if somebody tells you poison is health food and you drink it, who's going to die, you or him? What do you mean he tells you it's kosher? What do you think about the point? What
can the person do?
What can the person do?
Rectify.
So I said, he can rectify this. There's two aspects here. The sin he did because it was accidental, he's not that much to blame for it. But the bottom line is, did I elevate the food that I ate, the non-kosher food? That I did not elevate. The sin, there's two aspects here. As far as the sin goes, I did it accidentally. I didn't do anything wrong. Somebody told me it was kosher, and according to Allah, I'm allowed to rely on another Jew that tells me it's good. Well, that Jew made a mistake, whatever. I checked into it. Somebody told me it was kosher, and then I found out later that they were wrong. So as far as the sin goes, Hashem forgives me.
But what of the fact that it's part of your
the fact that that food is part of your system has an impact on you, whether you like it or not. That's in you. That trait for food became your blood and flesh.
Like the mamzer issue.
Yeah, like the mamzer issue. The mamzer is in something else, and this is within you. But it's still affecting you in any way, in any shape, size, or form. Again, the sin aspect of it, you're forgiven because you did it accidentally. You're sorry. Again, Hashem forgives you. But the bottom line is, what is in your system? Non-kosher food. That non-kosher food has an impact on the person. For how long? Until it stays in the system, I guess. I know, until it has an effect on the person. I don't think you could drown it out or nullify it by just eating a lot of kosher food. I don't think you'll gain weight, but I don't think it's actually going to help in any way whatsoever to rectify it. Anyway, again, the shir tonight is sponsored by Moshe Matuban in memory of his father's yahrzeit, Elisha ben Yosef. Neshama should have an aliyah.
Amen.
Everybody should have a good Shabbos and a good week. And then it's a Monday night, 8 o'clock, is the Parsha class.
You too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Take care. Bye.